Hello, I'm going to be answering these four questions for the second portfolio review. The first question is, what questions do you need answered before you start designing an experience? So, before designing an experience, I really want to consider who the target audience is, who's going to be using my design. So I try to figure out what their goals are, their needs, their behaviors, their attitudes, their pain points. Um, Another concept that I was recently learning about was business requirements. So that's something that I would want to consider, even though I've only been doing school projects, um, it would be something that I would deeply consider in the future as well. Second question, did you design your flows with different start points? In other words, not just onboarding, sign up, forgot password, etc. So in my flows, what I have used is Open App primarily. So I think it really depends on the task and who their user is. So whether the user has used the app before or if they're new. So if they're new, they would either go through login first or onboarding. But if they've used the app before, then they wouldn't have to go through that. So for my flows, it's been users that have used the app before. So that's why I started off with Open App. Third question, can you describe a time when the requirements changed in the middle of a project and how you handled that? So the requirements for my project haven't changed. The brief is still the same, but I did have something kind of come up with my research that kind of had to steer me another way in my design. So originally, my app was meant to provide motivation by correlating positive, healthy eating and exercise with uh is this the wrong one? Hello, I'm going to be answering the four interview questions for this second portfolio review. The first question is, what questions do you need answered before you start designing an experience? So before I start designing an experience, I really think about the target audience who's going to be using the app. I try to figure out what their goals are, what their needs are, what their motivations, behaviors, and attitudes are, as well as their pain points. And although I've only been designing with Career Foundry, something else that would need to be answered would be like business requirements and finding out what those are and finding out the project brief as well. Second question, did you design your flows with different start points? In other words, not just onboarding, sign up, forgot password, etc. So for me, the majority have been starting the entry point with Open App. And I think it really depends on who the user is. If it's somebody who has used the app before, or if it's a new user. Um, in my latest user flows, it's been people who have used the app before. It's been with that point of view. So I think it does really depend on who the user is as well as what task they are doing. Question 3. Can you describe a time when the requirements changed in the middle of a project and how you handled that? So with my project, there hasn't been any change in requirements. Um, the brief is still the same. Something that did happen that kind of steered the the project or the design a bit of a different direction. So the app was originally meant to provide motivation to practice healthy behaviors by correlating positive mood with healthy eating and exercise. So that was its primary focus. But as I did my interviews, my results showed that although users did feel very positively, very good about practicing healthy behaviors, their motivations for practicing these behaviors were primarily to either lose weight, maintain their weight, or to improve their long-term health. Their primary motivation was not to feel good. That was kind of a secondary effect. Out of the four people that I interviewed, one person did say that that was one of their primary reasons or motivations for practicing healthy behaviors is because they felt good doing them. But the rest listed that as kind of like a secondary thought. So, because of those users that said this, I really had to change a few things about the design. I had to consider what their motivations and needs and goals were. So, for that reason, I started, incorporating different things that I didn't intend to incorporate before. That way, the project really encompasses like what their wants and needs are going to be. Um, I did want to continue keeping the mood correlator in there just because two out of four of the people that I interviewed did do journaling, and three of them have done mood tracking before, and it's something that they're still doing. So because of that, I still wanted to keep in the mood tracker. And the mood tracker is still meant to motivate, and it's an optional thing. Not everyone has to do it. Um, but the other thing about it is it's really it is optional, but it's also there to help people understand how foods make them feel or exercises, and that could potentially motivate them. So I definitely want to keep that there, but now it's a bit of it's an optional feature, not so much the main feature as it was meant to be before. And question 4, what are the design tools in your tool belt and what situations do you use one tool or method over another? So, um, for interviews, I guess like tools, it would be tools that I use throughout the whole process. I would use Zoom for interviews because it's way better for time management. You don't have to meet up, and it's convenient. Um, to write out my questions, I start out writing them out. I'll put them into Google Docs and edit them, revise them. When I'm doing user flows and site maps, I use pen and paper, so I'll get out a notepad and do it that way. And then I will go into either Google Drawings is what I started off with, and now I'm dipping my toes into more Adobe XD and Figma. When I'm doing research or so for interviews, I will do recordings. So I'll listen to them and write notes. Sometimes I'll transcript them if responses aren't too long, because I do want to get direct quotes. Um, and I will do recording like either through Zoom, or if I'm interviewing them in person, I will record on my phone with their consent, of course. Um, I will do affinity mapping. I've done it for this project, and it was a pretty cool way to organize my thinking, so I really enjoyed that. And I did affinity mapping like with post-it notes and whiteboard. I did card sorting all digitally with Optimal Sort. For for prototypes, what I've done is I've just used Marvel low fidelity ones, but I am currently looking at tutorials on how to do high fidelity prototypes on Figma and Adobe XD. And for presenting, I use primarily Keynote on Mac, and for voice recording, I use Screencast-O-Matic, and I have tried Vineyard as well. So those are my responses to the portfolio. Thank you so much for listening. Bye bye.